The wrecking balls that swung at the end of the Gilded Age proved more efficient than any army at conquering Manhattan's architectural soul. Shockingly, in less than 50 years, New York's skyline transformed from a gallery of masterpieces into a collection of profitable rectangles. Each demolished structure represented decades of craftsmanship, millions in investment, and artistic vision that modern developers can barely comprehend. These lost giants once defined entire neighborhoods, their shadows falling across streets that hummed with the confidence of a nation discovering its cultural voice. Undoubtedly, the tragedy extends beyond mere nostalgia. These buildings embodied technical innovations and artistic achievements that took generations to perfect, then vanished in months of systematic destruction. Today we illustrate how New York's most spectacular Gilded Age landmarks disappeared forever, erasing architectural treasures that once defined American grandeur. So you've joined us once again, and a curious question has already formed in your mind. Why would the bustling metropolis New York City, the Big Apple, the city that never sleeps, choose to demolish one of its most treasured architectural icons? Pennsylvania Station, adorned in rich Beaux-Arts glory, was once a proud beacon in the rapidly growing New York skyline. Each of its ornate waiting rooms, broad concourses, and grand staircases were works of art, echoing stories of countless journeys and heartfelt reunions, whispered in the hallowed echoes of its cavernous halls. Yet, as the bard would say, therein lies the rub. How did such a remarkable monument to grandeur and elegance succumb to the swing of the wrecking ball, replaced by a functional but far less awe-inspiring transportation hub? In today's episode of Old Money Mansions, we will guide you through the captivating story of its creators, their daring vision to construct such a grand station in the heart of America's largest city, and its unfortunate downfall as we describe why New York's most beautiful public building was demolished. In order to answer this question fully, of course, we'll have to explain why the legendary old Penn Station in New York was built in the first place. In the beginning, it was meticulously designed as a formidable competitor to New York's Grand Central Terminal, with the clear aim to endow the Pennsylvania Railroad with an uninterrupted conduit into Manhattan, indisputably the paramount economic hub in America during that period. Before the rise of this iconic early 20th century landmark, Manhattan's only railway gateway was monopolized by the Vanderbilt family's New York Central Railroad, which came from the north across the Harlem River. The transportation landscape of New York was indeed considerably restricted, with only the New York Central Railroad having the privilege of direct entry into Manhattan through Grand Central. This created a rather challenging scenario for other railroads, particularly the Pennsylvania Railroad, seeking to establish a direct presence in the city. The Pennsylvania Railroad's initiative to break this monopoly was spearheaded by its president, Alexander Cassatt, who commissioned the construction of Penn Station. Born in 1839 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Alexander Johnston Cassatt was the seventh president of the company, with his tenure running from June 9, 1899, until his death on December 28, 1906. Alexander was the eldest amongst his siblings, and his career trajectory began as an engineer with the Pennsylvania Railroad. Over the years, Cassatt proved himself a maestro in managing transportation logistics. In order to gain proper training, he first graduated from the distinguished Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, a rigorous academic institution that also nurtured the genius behind the design of the Brooklyn Bridge, Washington Roebling. Now, Cassatt's uncompromising work ethic, exemplary integrity, and steadfast commitment to the railroad, its workforce and stakeholders set him apart. His monumental achievements during the Industrial Age propelled him into the sights of the era's luminaries such as Vanderbilt, Rockefeller, and Morgan. In fact, he was one of the rare individuals to be known to have the sincere respect of financier J.P. Morgan. For the monumental task of constructing the old New York Penn Station, Cassatt entrusted the architectural firm McKim, Mead and White, a decision influenced by their reputable standing and successful past projects. Founded by Charles Follen McKim, William Rutherford Mead and Stanford White, this firm was instrumental in shaping the architectural practice, urbanism and the paradigms of the American Renaissance in New York at the turn of the century. Known for their distinct Beaux-Arts masterpieces, which drew heavy inspiration from their European travels, the firm was responsible for several notable works such as Columbia University's library, the Brooklyn Museum in New York City, the Boston Public Library, and numerous opulent residences in Newport, Rhode Island. In his quest for a grand and monumental station, Cassatt found the perfect partner in McKim, Mead and White, whose reputation for designing such iconic structures made them the ideal choice for the project. Their prominence in the architectural realm and their ability to craft recognizable landmarks undoubtedly played a substantial role in Cassatt's decision to commission them for the creation of Penn Station. The station, completed in 1910, was more than just an architectural spectacle. It was a glittering beacon of engineering innovation. In fact, the construction necessitated the creation of underwater tunnels beneath the Hudson River, a feat previously unachieved. Before Penn Station, passengers traveling from New Jersey to Manhattan had to complete their journey by ferry. However, the emergence of Penn Station revolutionized this commute, ushering passengers into a beautifully intricate, towering sanctuary, forever altering the city's transportation landscape. Delving into the architectural marvel that was the original Penn Station in New York, the immediate standout feature was the imposing facade along 7th Avenue, with its northerly and southerly entrances equipped to admit carriages and a central entrance designed for pedestrians. It was indeed a sight to behold. This centerpiece comprised 6 Doric columns, the most modest of the Greek orders, supporting a subdued entablature crowned with a distinctive medallion. The column spacing, interestingly, takes inspiration from Bernini's Piazza in Rome. The structure was fashioned in the Beaux-Arts style, a tribute to the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, the epoch's most prominent and influential architectural institution. The Beaux-Arts style draws heavily from historical precedents, primarily the classical Greek and Roman aesthetics. In keeping with this tradition, the grand waiting room, towering above the rest of the station, was modeled after the baths of Caracalla from ancient Rome. As passengers navigated through the interior of the original Penn Station, they would observe 2 contrasting segments of this grand edifice. On the left, the waiting room with its impressive ceiling, and on the right, the train shed leading to the platforms. The waiting room immediately commanded attention with its vaulted, coffered ceiling, exquisitely carved out of stone, while a similar design, fashioned in steel, graces the train shed. However, the train shed swapped stone coffers for small panes of glass, serving as skylights, subtly illuminating the space. The similarity in the groin vaults seen in both sections makes a striking impression. Going deeper into the waiting room, arrivals could not help but notice the colossal entrances and exits bordering 7th and 8th Avenues. Furthermore, stairways leading to 33rd and 31st Streets were perfectly positioned at the ends, complemented by enormous clerestory windows that allow natural light to flood the hall. The coffered ceiling is fashioned out of travertine, meticulously quarried from Tivoli on the outskirts of Rome. Interestingly, this is the same stone that was used to construct Rome's famed Colosseum thousands of years prior. What set this room apart, however, was its astounding scale. We must truly marvel at the soaring heights of this enormous space, dwarfing its occupants. It was undoubtedly not just one of New York's finest public spaces, but also a globally significant architectural wonder of its time. Ascending from the train platform into the station, travelers first encountered the extraordinary skylit train shed. Its design drew inspiration from the renowned train sheds of Europe, yet the forms resonated strongly with the stonework of the central waiting room. What makes this structure particularly intriguing is the advanced engineering that went into its construction, a testament to the technological prowess of the era. The entire structure, including the columns, beams, and arches, were assembled from smaller sections, all painstakingly riveted together to create an intricately laced framework. Thus, Penn Station, completed 10 years into the 20th century, was not only an architectural masterpiece, but also an exemplar of the era's engineering sophistication. Now, intriguingly, the old Penn Station was not birthed from the generous hands of the government, state, or city. A private corporation, the proud proprietor of the land and edifice, was the mastermind behind this grand venture. This fact, though seemingly insignificant at the time, would later come to play a pivotal role in the station's tragic demise. You see, the downfall of the old New York Penn Station was a result of a broader narrative of decline that plagued the railroad industry, and specifically the financial predicaments of the Pennsylvania Railroad. This enormous station in the heart of Manhattan, amidst one of the nation's priciest real estate markets, proved increasingly burdensome for the company to maintain. By the twilight of its glory days, old New York Penn Station had shed much of its original grandeur due to a confluence of factors, among them the waning appeal of rail travel and the advent of alternative modes of transport, notably air travel. By then, the proliferation of automobiles and the dawn of the jet age had significantly reshaped people's traveling preferences, culminating in a dramatic decrease in demand for train services. Between 1945 and 1964, non-commuter rail passenger travel plummeted by a staggering 84%, as more Americans chose to journey by car or airplane. In a landmark shift in 1955, air travel in the United States surpassed train travel for the first time. By 1957, airliners had overtaken ocean liners as the favored means of traversing the Atlantic. This declining demand dealt a devastating blow to train stations, leading to their neglect and eventual demolition or repurposing. The desire for alternative revenue sources, such as leasing the air rights above the station or converting the land for other uses, also fueled the demolition of these grand structures. The dwindling interest in train travel was not only a product of the rise of air travel, but also stemmed from the expanding highway system in the United States. The creation of high-speed, four-lane corridors facilitated road travel, further undermining passenger rail travel. Additionally, the stringent sanctions and regulations imposed by the Interstate Commerce Commission or the ICC on the railroad industry significantly contributed to the waning fortunes of railroads. Consequently, the once awe-inspiring station progressively devolved into a grimy, deteriorating shadow of its former self. The exterior, once adorned with ornate pink granite, was now covered in filth, and the interior marred by the intrusion of advertisements and modern alterations, detracting significantly from its original grandeur. Noted architectural theorist and critic Lewis Mumford, in 1958, described the station as dingy, dark and cheerless, a mournful elegy to its fallen glory. Now, William Zeckendorf, a renowned real estate magnate, entered into a pivotal agreement with Pennsylvania Railroad President James Symes in 1955, laying claim to the air rights of Penn Station. Born in the modest town of Paris, Illinois, Zeckendorf relocated to the bustling metropolis of New York City at the tender age of 3. He forsook formal education at New York University to dive into the cutthroat world of real estate. A daring gambler at heart, Zeckendorf Sr. had a flair for gathering land parcels for monumental projects. Among his crowning achievements was the meticulous assembly of 75 parcels of land on the affluent east side of Manhattan, which would subsequently morph into the site of the United Nations. He had a hand in the development of iconic sites such as Century City in Los Angeles, Roosevelt Field Shopping Center on Long Island, along with various urban renewal endeavors in Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. Furthermore, he collaborated with some of the most illustrious architects of the time, including the likes of I.M. Pei and Le Corbusier, for his grand projects. Zeckendorf Sr. had a reputation for being a visionary in the realm of real estate development. Unfazed by debt, he considered it a lever for his grand plans. He once famously quipped, "I'd rather be alive at 18% than dead at the prime rate." However, his penchant for risk-taking would ultimately be his downfall, leading to his bankruptcy in 1965 and the subsequent loss of his entire portfolio to creditors. Now, the lucrative mid-Manhattan station site was the prime allure for Zeckendorf's involvement in the Penn Station project. Initially, Zeckendorf conceived a plan to replace the station with a Palace of Progress, a merchandise mart of colossal proportions. However, in a strange turn of events, the Pennsylvania Railroad decided to cede its air rights for a new Madison Square Garden and an office tower. Thus, in 1961, the Pennsylvania Railroad executives made the fateful decision to dismantle the station and lease out its airspace to supplement their income. This triggered a public outcry, with droves of people protesting the decision in August 1962. The Action Group for Better Architecture was established to spearhead the efforts to salvage the Beaux-Arts structure, but their endeavors were to no avail. The demolition of Penn Station, a heart-rending spectacle, commenced on October 28, 1963, and lasted until 1968. Workers began tearing down the majestic limestone walls, stone eagles, and towering 30-foot-tall Doric columns. The demolition, a pivotal event that captured the media's attention, marked the bitter end of an era for this iconic edifice. In a bittersweet end to the tale, the demise of the old New York Penn Station proved to be the catalyst that ignited the modern historic preservation movement in the United States. The monumental loss spurred the establishment of the Landmarks Preservation Commission and effected a change in the city's development priorities, thereby saving other historic structures such as New York City's legendary Grand Central Terminal. The preservation movement that sprang from the ashes of Penn Station has since been instrumental in the protection of thousands of architecturally, historically, and culturally significant buildings and sites across the country. Once upon a time, in the heart of New York City, stood a mansion so luxurious that it was known as the Jewel of Fifth Avenue. This eye-waveringly beautiful abode was the home of Louis Comfort Tiffany, one of the world's most famous jewelers and designers. Indeed, the mansion was a masterpiece of American architecture and design, symbolizing Tiffany's success and his love of art. And yet, in 1936, the mansion was demolished, certainly a tragic loss for New York City, and to this day, it remains a controversial topic. In today's video at Old Money Mansions, we'll explain how such a glittering jewel in the city that never sleeps could ever be removed, and tell you why New York's most luxurious mansion was demolished. Born into a family already bathed in the aura of luxury and artistry, Louis Comfort Tiffany was born in New York City on the 18th of February, 1848. He was the son of Harriet Olivia Avery Young and Charles Louis Tiffany, the latter being the founder of the inimitable jewelry empire, Tiffany & Company. Though his early life involved stints at military academies, the magnetic pull of the arts was irresistible, likely influenced by his father's involvement in fine and decorative arts. He sought the mentorship of renowned painter George Inness and had a meteoric rise, joining the American Society of Painters in watercolor by just 19, while his works found a place at the esteemed National Academy of Design. Indeed, Tiffany's artistic endeavors were not limited to one medium. His oeuvre stretched from painting to ceramics, jewelry design, and metalwork, all through the transformative decades from the 1870s to the 1920s. However, he carved a niche in the annals of art history for his innovations in stained glass, making him an eminent figure in the American Art Nouveau movement. Specifically, his genius was part of the esteemed Associated Artists Collective, collaborating with such illustrious names as Lockwood de Forest, Candace Wheeler, and Samuel Coleman. Now one might surmise that a man of Tiffany's artistic passion and family legacy would seek to manifest his ideals in a personal space, a sanctuary of aesthetic expression. Thus the seeds were sown for the Tiffany Mansion. As a resounding statement of his family's artistic and business legacy, as well as his personal love for multiple art forms, the mansion could stand as an enduring edifice to creativity and luxury. And, when crafting this haven, Tiffany enlisted none other than the iconic architect Stanford White. White's name was synonymous with architectural elegance during that period, having designed the Washington Square Arch and the second Madison Square Garden. Additionally, we've featured Stanford White's achievement before in other episodes here at Old Money Mansions. Now, completed in 1885, the Tiffany Mansion stood as an architectural tour de force, a physical embodiment of Louis Comfort's unique artistry and a symbol of his illustrious family legacy. Not just a residence, but a monument to American art and design, the Tiffany Mansion incorporated Tiffany's passion for various artistic mediums into its very walls, while also serving as a beacon of his achievements. This structure, often associated with Louis Tiffany alone, was in fact an amalgamation of three distinct apartments. The first, reserved for Charles Louis Tiffany, remained unoccupied, a poignant symbol of a son's distant relationship with trade. The second apartment belonged to Louis's unmarried sister, Louise, while the third, spanning the fourth and fifth floors, became the private domain of Louis himself. This architectural masterpiece reached new heights with turrets, balconies, oriel windows, and a formidable tile roof as its cap. Yet its massive castle-like facade was met with mixed reviews, some finding it incongruent with the concept of a domestic dwelling. In contrast, others hailed it as one of the nation's finest examples of residential architecture. One feature often overlooked, but equally spectacular, was the colossal gable facing Madison Avenue. It had a 15-panel window that glowed onto Louis Tiffany's opulent studio, which was 80 feet wide and towering in height. This studio, veiled in curiosity and mystery, became integral to the mansion's allure. As the 1890s unfolded, the Tiffany Mansion evolved into a symbol of opulence and artistic prowess. It was an embodiment of Louis Tiffany's unique artistic vision, a fusion of Islamic motifs and natural elements in the Art Nouveau style. Indeed, the mansion stood as a symbol of Tiffany's mastery in stained glass, with its windows captivating viewers with depictions of nature, religion, and mythology. Additionally, the mansion's opulence extended beyond its stained glass windows, as Tiffany commissioned custom furniture and furnishings crafted from precious metals and gemstones. It thus became an artistic headquarters where art, luxury, and innovation coexisted harmoniously. However, with such a grand entrance into the world of architecture, it seems almost unimaginable now that one day this lovely home would meet its eventual end, due to a confluence of harrowing factors that we will soon discuss. Throughout its heyday, the Tiffany Mansion would play host to lavish social events that further solidified its position as the epicenter of New York's elite society. The mansion's opulent interiors and Tiffany's artistic innovations were showcased to the city's luminaries and foreign dignitaries, who marveled at its grandeur as they enjoyed a series of socialite soirees hosted by Louis Comfort Tiffany himself. Indeed, these gatherings transcended mere entertainment. They were pivotal in solidifying Tiffany's position as a leading figure in New York society. Furthermore, for a while, amid economic downturns, the Tiffany Mansion displayed astounding resilience, and the year 1912 marked a period of remarkable innovations showcased within the mansion's walls, with innovative techniques such as the copper foil method and Favril glass taking center stage. These pioneering methods not only earned Tiffany recognition, but also set new standards in stained glass production. Soon thereafter, World War I would leave an indelible mark on the Tiffany Mansion. Louis Tiffany, leveraging his wealth and influence, actively supported the war effort, and the mansion would serve as a venue for fundraising events that rallied the community to contribute to the cause. In addition to financial contributions, Tiffany opened the mansion's doors for a noble purpose. It became a training center for nurses under the American Red Cross, and also housed a military hospital where wounded soldiers received essential care. Thus, during this period, the Tiffany Mansion went beyond its role as a symbol of opulence. It became a place where people came together to support the troops and provide vital aid to the wounded. Yet, as they always say, no good deed goes unpunished. And true to form, shortly after the cessation of hostilities in World War I, and, ironically, during the economic boom of the Roaring Twenties, Louis Comfort Tiffany's fortunes, and thus his lovely home, would be put in heart-stopping jeopardy. In 1922, the Tiffany family came to face financial struggles that affected the upkeep of their sumptuous mansion. Specifically, Louis Comfort Tiffany's sister, Louise, had to provide the foundation with $7,000 in funds, equivalent to over $100,000 today, and she repeated the gesture the following year with an additional $10,000 gift, which Tiffany himself also matched. The building was crumbling, a terrace had collapsed under the weight of snow, and combined with a hefty legal retainer to their lawyers, the foundation's finances were in peril. By 1927, the Tiffany family had decided to sell their Tiffany Park estate in Irvington to the Mathewson family. This marked the first shift in ownership of the mansion, which had been the site of Charles Tiffany's mansion since he and his niece's husband, banker James L. Dunham, purchased 50 acres from a financially strapped Ellis in 1863. And the Great Depression in 1931 further accelerated the mansion's decline. The economic realities of the time, along with several cumbersome maintenance issues at Laurelton Hall, made the foundation's financial situation increasingly precarious. The house and its grounds required constant upkeep, and the foundation's endowment needed to be frequently mined to keep the estate running. Louis Tiffany died in the 72nd Street house in 1933, and within 3 short years, his family's great mansion was demolished in 1936. However, this story may arguably not have a sad ending, for the demolition of the Tiffany Mansion in 1936 was not just an isolated event. It served as one of the catalysts for an architectural revolution in the subsequent decades. Several decades after the demolition of the iconic Tiffany Mansion, New Yorkers rallied for change after learning of the loss of such a magnificent structure. In 1965, Mayor Robert F. Wagner would sign groundbreaking legislation that resulted from this public outcry and established the Landmarks Preservation Commission. The destruction of the Tiffany Mansion, along with other heartbreaking demolitions like that of the old Penn station, likely served as a poignant reminder of what was at stake, influencing New York's newfound commitment to safeguarding its architectural gems. Additionally, the Tiffany Mansion continued to live on in collective memory, partly thanks to its depiction in popular culture during the 1990s. Films such as Woody Allen's Manhattan and The Bonfire of the Vanities, along with the iconic television series Sex and the City, paid homage to the mansion, sparking renewed interest in its history. In Manhattan specifically, Woody Allen's character debates modern architecture within the mansion setting, subtly criticizing the movement that often led to the loss of such historic buildings. Likewise, in The Bonfire of the Vanities, the mansion is a backdrop to the social intricacies of New York's elite, capturing its lasting cultural influence. Thus, even decades after its demolition, the Tiffany Mansion's allure remains practically undiminished. In the 2010s, it featured prominently in historical texts and exhibitions, with a notable example being its inclusion in the 2012 exhibition at the Museum of the City of New York, titled Lost New York. Such references signal an ongoing fascination with the mansion and, by extension, a continual examination of the importance of architectural preservation in shaping a city's identity. Indeed, the long-term impact of the mansion's demolition on New York's cultural and architectural scene may be difficult to quantify, but its absence speaks volumes. Let's place you in a time machine and take you back to turn-of-the-century New York City, before the Empire State Building, the Chrysler, or even the Woolworth Building. When you arrive, you would find yourself standing amidst a whirlwind of progress, where horse-drawn carriages jostle with streetcars on cobblestone roads, and gentlemen in top hats and morning coats stroll alongside ladies adorned in elaborate gowns and parasols. But one look up into the sky and you would see not only the tallest building in the city, but at its completion, the tallest building in the world, the majestic Singer Building. Completed in 1908, this architectural marvel soared to 612 feet, its elegant Beaux-Arts design crowned by a slender tower that seemed to pierce the clouds. It was the pride of the city, a beacon of ambition and modernity. Indeed, for many years, the Singer Building stood as a crown jewel of the city's skyline, admired by locals and visitors alike. But despite its towering elegance, the Singer Building's reign was not to last. As the decades passed and the city evolved, newer and taller skyscrapers emerged, casting the once mighty Singer into their shadows, and in 1968, a shocking decision that would resonate through architectural history was made. The Singer Building would be demolished, becoming the tallest building ever to be intentionally destroyed. In today's episode, we'll describe its epic rise and fall, literally, unpacking the story of how the world's tallest skyscraper came to vanish from the skyline it once ruled, as we describe why the tallest building in the world was demolished. The ascent of the Singer Company from a pioneering enterprise to the creation of the iconic Singer Building is a towering story of industrial prowess and visionary architecture. Established in 1851 by Isaac Merritt Singer and Edward Clark, the Singer Manufacturing Company revolutionized the sewing machine industry with its groundbreaking designs and strategic innovations. And by the late 19th century, Singer had risen to prominence as a global leader in sewing machine manufacturing, addressing market demands and setting new benchmarks for consumer products. Now, Isaac Singer's initial contributions transformed the sewing machine from an industrial tool into a household essential. You see, prior to Singer's advancements, sewing machines were largely confined to industrial settings. But Singer introduced critical enhancements, including the eye-pointed needle and the lock stitch, which rendered these machines suitable for domestic use. And this innovation unlocked a new market, leading to a surge in demand as sewing machines became a staple in homes across the globe. Furthermore, the success of Singer's enterprise was as much a result of strategic marketing as it was of technological progress. The introduction of installment payment plans revolutionized the purchase process, making the machines more accessible to a wider audience. And this pioneering approach helped Singer secure a dominant position in the market. By 1863, the company had become the largest sewing machine manufacturer worldwide, and its expansion into international markets was already underway. Next, Edward Clark, who succeeded Singer, played a crucial role in furthering the company's growth. For example, Clark was pivotal in streamlining operations and extending the company's global reach. And under his leadership, Singer emerged as the first American multinational corporation, establishing factories and sales offices across Europe and Asia. This extensive global presence allowed Singer to capture a significant portion of the international market, reinforcing its status as a leading industry player. But it was Frederick Gilbert Bourne who became president in 1889 and envisioned establishing a monumental presence in New York City. And his ambition was to create a headquarters that would not only function effectively, but also embody the company's industrial achievements and innovative spirit. You see, during this transformative period, New York City was undergoing a dramatic architectural evolution. And the late 19th and early 20th centuries marked the advent of the skyscraper era, fueled by innovations in steel frame construction and the safety elevator. These advancements enabled architects to design taller and more ambitious structures, reshaping the city's skyline. Consequently, notable figures such as Louis Sullivan, often celebrated as the father of skyscrapers, pioneered steel frame construction, influencing architects like Daniel Burnham. For instance, Burnham's iconic Flatiron Building, completed in 1902, stands as an icon of this era of architectural innovation. Thus, the Singer Building's development was a significant chapter in this architectural evolution. The project commenced with the construction of a 10-story building at 149 Broadway between 1897 and 1898, followed by the adjacent 14-story Bourne Building on Liberty Street in the year 1898. These structures laid the foundation for the Singer Tower, which soared an additional 27 stories, resulting in a total height of 41 stories. Completed in 1908, the Singer Building reached 612 feet, or 187 meters, making it the tallest building in the world at the time and a striking symbol of architectural progress. It held this title of tallest building in the world until a year later in 1909, when it was surpassed by the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company Tower. But it was in the building's brilliance of design, led by Vanderbilt family relative and architect Ernest Flagg, that the structure really stood out. In the next chapter, we'll meet him and discuss the peak of the Singer Building. By the time of the building's planning, its architect, Ernest Flagg, had emerged as a pivotal figure in architecture with his innovative designs, particularly in the Beaux-Arts style, which he helped popularize during that era. Born on the 6th of February 1857 in Brooklyn, New York, Flagg's early exposure to the arts came through his father, Jared Bradley Flagg, an Episcopal priest and painter who infused Ernest's formative years with artistic inspiration. First, Flagg's journey began in the financial realm as an office boy on Wall Street and later in his family's real estate ventures, before a transformative opportunity redirected his path. Now Flagg's architectural destiny was shaped by his cousin, none other than Cornelius Vanderbilt II, who recognized his talent and financed his education at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris from 1889 to 1891. And this prestigious institution, the heart of the Beaux-Arts movement, imbued Flagg with a deep appreciation for classical Greek and Roman influences, as well as Renaissance and Baroque embellishments. Thus, during this era, architects like Henri Labrouste and Charles Garnier began integrating medieval and Renaissance architectural models, striving to create a style that was both authentically French and modern. This style soon spread to the United States, where it became synonymous with the American Renaissance movement. But other American architects, including Richard Morris Hunt and Henry Hobson Richardson, who had also studied at the École des Beaux-Arts, were additionally instrumental in introducing and popularizing this architectural language in America. Soon, in the United States, the Beaux-Arts style became synonymous with grandeur and civic pride, frequently employed in public and institutional buildings such as museums, libraries, and government offices, as well as grand private residences. And the style's emphasis on symmetry, classical detailing, and monumental scale suited the ambitions of the Gilded Age perfectly. Moreover, the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893 showcased Beaux-Arts architecture, cementing its status as an embodiment of both corporate success and civic dignity. Therefore, Ernest Flagg, influenced by his education at the École des Beaux-Arts, emerged as a leading figure in this new monumental style of American architecture, with Flagg's designs embodying the Beaux-Arts principles. Now, the Singer Building, a triumph of artistic expression, featured a facade that transformed it into a monumental work of art rather than just an office building. Its base, extending 12 stories, was designed to blend harmoniously with the surrounding urban fabric, mimicking the appearance of a townhouse to maintain architectural continuity. This strategic approach set the stage for the dramatic ascent of the tower above, enhancing the building's presence in the skyline. And the tower, rising impressively, featured setbacks that made the upper floors narrower than the base. This design innovation not only contributed to the building's striking silhouette, but also allowed more light and air to reach the streets below, a critical consideration in the dense environment of early 20th century Manhattan. Nonetheless, these setbacks presented practical challenges, as the narrower upper floors limited commercial viability, eventually contributing to the building's eventual demolition. Inside, the Singer Building dazzled with its opulent interior. The lobby, clad in Turkish white marble, was adorned with meticulously carved shields and gold leaves from Italian marble. This luxurious ambiance was complemented by bronze medallions depicting symbols of the Singer Company's legacy. And the office floors of the base were painted in pristine white, symbolizing modernity and cleanliness, while the tower floors featured olive green paint and intricate metal detailing, distinguishing the different sections of the building. Technological advancements were a hallmark of the Singer Building. It boasted 16 electric elevators, a cutting-edge feature for efficient vertical transportation, and a sophisticated thermostatic heating system for precise climate control. Ingeniously, the building drew water directly from the city's treatment plant, ensuring a reliable and clean supply. Yet, even with all of these advances, soon the modern 20th century would come calling, leading the Singer Building in harm's way. At its peak, the Singer Building became a bustling nucleus of commerce from its inauguration through the 1950s, and epitomized the zenith of early 20th century office design. Occupying a prime location at Liberty Street and Broadway, the Singer Building quickly became an attractive address for various businesses, and the original 10-story structure, prior to the addition of its iconic tower, featured lower floors that attracted banks and prestigious firms seeking an enviable presence in Manhattan's financial district. Indeed, this strategic positioning contributed to its allure, offering businesses a notable address amid the energetic environment of the city. And as the building evolved, so did its architectural and functional elements. The 1920s witnessed a thoughtful renovation aimed at preserving many of its initial decorative features while adapting to the changing needs of its tenants. This period also maintained the opulence and character of the early design, aligning with the era's emphasis on elaborate office environments. The subsequent decades ushered in notable shifts in office design philosophy. For example, the 1930s and 1940s saw a gradual transition influenced by the economic realities of the Great Depression and World War II. During this era, the Taylorist office layout, which prioritized efficiency akin to factory production, remained predominant. However, the influence of architects like Frank Lloyd Wright began to surface, introducing elements such as biomimicry and open-plan designs that sought to enhance work environments. These designs aimed to foster more comfortable and inspiring spaces while maintaining a hierarchical structure. Consequently, by the late 1950s, the Singer Building faced growing challenges. Its facilities began to fall behind contemporary office standards, reflecting the broader shifts in architectural and functional requirements. And the post-war era, marked by a surge in office construction featuring steel and glass, introduced the open-plan layout that encouraged greater collaboration and communication among employees. The bullpen configuration emerged as a popular design, characterized by expansive open spaces that facilitated teamwork. This period also saw the rise of mid-century modern furniture, focusing on practicality and streamlined aesthetics. Therefore, despite its earlier prestige, the Singer Building struggled to adapt to these new demands. Its narrow upper floors, though visually striking, proved inadequate for the space requirements of modern businesses. Moreover, the building's infrastructure, including outdated mechanical systems and amenities, fell short of the advanced features offered by newer office buildings. The lack of air conditioning and improved lighting further exacerbated the decline in tenant occupancy. Then, the 1960s marked a significant shift in the real estate landscape of New York City. The demand for office space surged, but the Singer Building's design inefficiencies rendered it commercially obsolete. The era's architectural zeitgeist favored functionality and space maximization, overshadowing the ornate design elements of previous generations. And this transition reflected a broader urban renewal trend, where modernist ideals increasingly replaced older, more decorative styles. As skyscrapers that prioritized aesthetic appeal became less viable, the real estate market shifted towards structures that could accommodate more tenants and generate greater revenue. The Singer Building, despite its historical significance and architectural splendor, could not compete with the evolving demands of Manhattan's corporate environment, sowing the seeds for its future destruction. In the early 1960s, the Singer Building, a pinnacle of architectural elegance and once the tallest skyscraper in the world, faced an uncertain destiny. Originally a hallmark of innovation when it rose above New York City's skyline, the Singer Building had become a relic of a bygone era by the time the 1960s arrived. By then, the Singer Manufacturing Company, having relocated its headquarters to the Rockefeller Center, left behind its distinctive Beaux-Arts Tower, casting the building's future into doubt. Thus, the fate of the Singer Building was irrevocably sealed in 1961 when Webb & Knapp, a prominent development firm, acquired the property. The architectural marvel's design, once praised for its sophisticated complexity, had become a drawback, and these constraints contrasted sharply with the evolving demands of Manhattan's financial district, which was experiencing rapid economic expansion. You see, the transformation of Manhattan's financial district during this period was driven by a shift in economic priorities and land use. The island's finite real estate made land a premium commodity, especially in lower Manhattan, where financial institutions and corporate headquarters were densely packed. This intense concentration of economic activity led to soaring land values and a pressing need for redevelopment. Therefore, at the time, the average office space needed by financial firms had grown significantly to accommodate larger workforces and sophisticated technology. Thus, the building's charm was insufficient to offset its operational inefficiencies, particularly when neighboring structures provided more functional office spaces. And, despite the burgeoning preservation movement in New York City, efforts to save the Singer Building were stymied by the relentless drive for new development. Established in 1965, just 3 short years before Singer's demise, the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission came too late to prevent the loss of many architectural treasures, including the Singer Building. And although respected architectural critics and historians recognized the building's significance, the economic realities and urban planning pressures proved insurmountable. Alan Burnham, a noted critic, highlighted the challenges of preserving such a structure without substantial financial backing, a scenario the Singer Building could not overcome. In 1967, the decision was made to demolish the Singer Building along with the adjacent City Investing Building, paving the way for One Liberty Plaza. Shockingly, the Singer Building's demolition, completed in 1968, was notable as the largest intentional dismantling of its time. Now, One Liberty Plaza, completed in 1973 and designed by Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, starkly contrasted with the ornate Singer Building. This modernist structure, with its imposing black steel facade and expansive floor plates, embodied the era's focus on efficiency and functionality. And the new skyscraper, with 54 stories and 2.3 million square feet of office space, reflected the priorities of New York's burgeoning financial sector, though it came at the cost of the city's architectural heritage. The legacy of the Singer Building endures as a symbol of the ongoing tension between preservation and progress. Its demolition remains a poignant example of the sacrifices made in the name of modernization, a reminder of the delicate balance between honoring the past and embracing the future. At one point, Manhattan's City Investing Building stood as a paragon of opulence in the sky, a soaring monument to ambition and aesthetic brilliance in the Big Apple. Completed in 1908, this Beaux-Arts colossus indeed dominated the skyline with its imposing 33 stories, stretching toward the heavens like a symbol of the city's relentless ascent. And its intricate facade gleamed with the craftsmanship unlike anything built today, while inside, its vast corridors and cutting-edge amenities embodied the zenith of luxury and innovation. Thus, for decades, this architectural titan commanded awe, representing the pinnacle of New York's rise to global prominence. But as the years wore on, the winds of progress shifted, and what was once a beacon of modernity became a relic, its grandeur overshadowed by newer, sleeker skyscrapers designed for efficiency rather than ornamentation. By the middle of the century, the City Investing Building found itself on borrowed time, a fading legend soon to meet the tragic fate of demolition. In today's episode, we dive into the mystery of how exactly one of Manhattan's most iconic structures was taken from the skyline, as we describe why New York's most opulent skyscraper was demolished. Now, to begin, let us first give you a lay of the land and the sky with regard to the development of architecture that would lead to such grandiose buildings. You see, the race to build skyscrapers in early 20th century America was an exhilarating period of innovation, ambition, and fierce rivalry, particularly between New York City and Chicago. And this skyscraper race wasn't just about constructing tall buildings, it was about cities flexing their architectural muscles, fueled by economic growth, urbanization, and the desire to claim the sky. But it all began in the late 19th century when Chicago took the lead with the construction of the Home Insurance Building in 1885. Often considered the world's first skyscraper, its steel-frame structure unlocked new possibilities, allowing buildings to soar to previously unimaginable heights. Yet, as the competition heated up, New York City quickly took center stage, driven by its booming financial sector and the limited land available on Manhattan Island. And by the 1890s, New York had embraced skyscrapers as a symbol of its modern, unstoppable progress. The skyline began to evolve rapidly with the rise of towering structures like the World Building and the Park Row Building, the latter holding the title of the world's tallest building from 1899 until 1908. These early skyscrapers were made possible by groundbreaking innovations like steel construction, elevators, and electric lighting, forever changing the city's horizon. Then, at the turn of the 20th century, New York City experienced a surge in skyscraper construction, and its population had exploded, growing from 1.2 million in 1880 to over 3.4 million by 1900. And this skyrocketing demand for space gave rise to buildings that not only solved practical problems, but also embodied the city's relentless ambition. Thus, iconic structures like the Flatiron Building, the Singer Tower, and the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company Tower sprang up during this time, each pushing the limits of engineering while showcasing a range of architectural styles. Indeed, these skyscrapers weren't just buildings. They were statements of power, innovation, and the eclectic tastes of a rapidly modernizing era. Yet, this vertical rush didn't come without its challenges. It was within this broader context, a true race to the sky, that, in 1908, a colossal addition to the New York skyline came to life with the completion of the City Investing Building, a towering marvel designed by the architectural duo Francis H. Kimball and G. Kramer Thompson. Commissioned by the City Investing Company under the leadership of Robert E. Dowling, this project wasn't just another drop in the bucket. It was a $10 million enterprise that etched its place in the annals of early 20th century architecture, making it one of the most ambitious private building ventures in New York City's burgeoning metropolis. Now, architect Francis H. Kimball, a name synonymous with architectural innovation, brought his distinctive flair to the City Investing Building. Born in 1845 in Kennebunk, Maine, Kimball cut his teeth in the world of architecture in England before setting up shop in New York City. With a career that began alongside Thomas Weisdell, yielding creations like the Casino Theatre on Broadway, Kimball quickly established himself as a leading figure in skyscraper design. Then, when Weisdell passed away in 1884, Kimball struck out on his own, later joining forces with G. Kramer Thompson in 1892, a partnership that would yield some of the era's most iconic structures. And Kimball's work was characterized by his masterful use of terracotta ornamentation and a skillful blend of historical styles. Indeed, his resume boasted significant contributions to New York's architectural landscape, including the Empire Building and the Manhattan Life Insurance Building. The latter, once the city's tallest, highlighted Kimball's pioneering use of steel frame construction, a technique that allowed structures to reach unprecedented heights while maintaining intricate ornamental facades. Therefore, the City Investing Building stood as a towering example of Kimball's architectural genius and the sheer ambition of its developers. Soaring to 486 feet with 33 stories, it wasn't just a building, it was a statement. And at its heart was a grand arcade stretching from Broadway to Church Street, serviced by 21 plunger elevators, an essential feature for the bustling offices within. The building's foundation, reaching down 80 feet to bedrock via caissons, supported its nearly 500-foot height, allowing it to house some of the largest corporations of the time. Occupying an entire city block, the City Investing Building wasn't just known for its height, but also for its sprawling footprint, offering more floor space than many of its contemporaries. Designed in the opulent Beaux-Arts style, the building's exterior was a study in contrasts. The base, clad in light stone, gave way to a shaft and capital adorned in white brick and terracotta, with porcelain and enamel brick reducing cleaning needs, an innovative touch that kept its facade pristine. And if you were to step inside, the luxury would only intensify. Marble floors, intricate woodwork, and opulent finishes were standard fare, reflecting the affluence of its tenants. The building's structural prowess was equally impressive, featuring a steel frame, concrete slab floors, and terracotta arches. With 9.1 million bricks, 25,000 lighting fixtures, and 3,000 short tons of terracotta, the City Investing Building was a material masterpiece. Plus, marble abounded, with £8.1 million used throughout, and 21.8 million mosaic cubes added a touch of artistic grandeur. Yet, its design wasn't just about aesthetics. Practicality played a role too. The building's F-shaped configuration, with northward-facing prongs on Cortlandt Street, ensured that natural light flooded the interior, a must-have in an era before ubiquitous electric lighting. And the Broadway entrance, with its semicircular headed opening, set the tone for the building's grandeur, while sculptural groups by Vincenzo Alfano added a final flourish to its ornate facade. Almost instantly, the City Investing Building wasn't just a hub of activity. It was a cornerstone of New York's architectural and commercial history, standing tall as a testament to the possibilities of its time. Now, between the 1920s and 1950s, New York City evolved into a beacon for corporations and businesses, drawing them to its shores like a magnet attracting iron filings. And right in the thick of this buzz was the City Investing Building, a commercial hive that stood tall, reflecting the economic pulse of the era. Additionally, the design of the City Investing Building captured the architectural zeitgeist of the period, flaunting a steel frame construction that reached for the skies and offered expansive floor plans. As previously mentioned, skyscrapers during this time weren't merely places to work, they were grand symbols of modernity, standing as vertical declarations of progress and ambition. And Manhattan, surrounding the City Investing Building, was also in the midst of a metamorphosis. The Roaring Twenties were more than just a catchy moniker. They were a period of explosive growth and change for New York City. The skyline was being redrawn, one iconic skyscraper at a time. Among these architectural marvels were the Chrysler Building and the Empire State Building, structures that didn't just scrape the sky, but carved out New York's identity as a city on the rise. The Chrysler Building, with its gleaming terraced crown and metallic ornamentation, became the poster child of the Art Deco style when it was completed in 1930. But its reign as the world's tallest was short-lived, as the Empire State Building swiftly eclipsed it in 1931. While the Empire State Building was a taller structure, it also symbolized something greater: New York City's unyielding resilience and aspiration, especially significant given its completion during the throes of the Great Depression. As the years ticked by and the city kept expanding, the architectural landscape saw yet another evolution with the emergence of the international style in the mid-20th century. This style was a stark departure from the ornate. It embraced simplicity, function, and a no-frills approach to design. For example, the Seagram Building, which graced the skyline in 1958, became the paragon of this new aesthetic. Designed by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe and Philip Johnson, the Seagram Building's bronze facade and open plaza set a new bar for modern skyscrapers, influencing countless buildings that came after. But New York City's transformation during these decades wasn't confined to the erection of taller and sleeker structures. Infrastructure was the silent force driving the city's expansion and connectivity. The subway system, which began its expansion in the early 20th century, played a pivotal role in linking the city's diverse neighborhoods, making it easier for people to move around and encouraging the development of commercial and residential areas far beyond the crowded heart of Lower Manhattan. Bridges and tunnels also began to knit Manhattan more closely with the surrounding boroughs and even New Jersey, facilitating the movement of goods and people and pumping lifeblood into the city's economy. But the subway lines, bridges and tunnels weren't just about transportation. They were arteries feeding the city's insatiable growth. New neighborhoods and business districts sprouted up, drawn by the city's ever-growing economic opportunities and magnetic cultural allure. Subsequently, the evolution of the City Investing Building's surroundings mirrored a broader trend of urbanization and modernization that was sweeping across cities worldwide. And the 1940s and 1950s were particularly transformative for New York City, as it shook off the lingering shadows of the Great Depression and World War II. The post-war boom brought with it an explosion of economic activity and urban development. Therefore, demand for both residential and commercial spaces surged, driven by returning veterans and a burgeoning middle class, sparking a construction frenzy that redefined the city's skyline. Meanwhile, the commercial district around the City Investing Building was not insulated from these changes. It too saw the rise of new office towers catering to the booming industries of finance, advertising and media. Madison Avenue, for instance, became synonymous with the advertising boom of the 1950s, an era immortalized in the television series Mad Men. Creative minds flocked to the sleek new office spaces, where they concocted advertising campaigns that would forever shape American culture. In the next chapter, we'll detail how, although many iconic structures in the Big Apple were able to evade the wrecking ball of progress during this time, the City Investing Building was not. By the swinging 60s, the prime piece of Manhattan real estate beneath the City Investing Building had become a golden goose, while the building itself began showing its age. And the skyscraper, once a shining beacon of early 20th century opulence and cutting-edge design, was no longer the darling of the architectural world. With time, its charm faded as newer, sleeker high-rises emerged, designed with an eye for efficiency, boasting floor plans that made the city investing building look more like an eccentric relic than a coveted address. And while the city investing building was an architectural marvel of its time, a structure with a distinctive F-shaped footprint that ensured it stood out in the concrete jungle, this very design, paradoxically once praised for its uniqueness, became its Achilles heel. You see, the quirky layout led to irregular floor spaces, a puzzling labyrinth that modern tenants found less than desirable. Therefore, in an era that increasingly prized open plans and streamlined functionality, the building's eccentric charm was, unfortunately, a deal-breaker. By the mid-20th century, the city investing building's fortunes had decidedly turned. The once iconic landmark was now viewed as an artifact from a bygone era, charming but impractical. New skyscrapers, equipped with the latest amenities and infrastructure, lured tenants away with the promise of more bang for their buck. The city investing building, with its aging bones and quirky interior, couldn't keep up with the Joneses of the skyline. The building's fall from grace was as inevitable as it was disheartening. The inevitable came to pass in 1968, when the decision was made to demolish the city investing building, erasing it from the cityscape less than 60 years after its grand opening. The rationale for this drastic measure was clear-cut, a mix of economic pragmatism and the relentless march of modernity. And the building, despite its grandeur, had become a maintenance nightmare. The elaborate design that had once been its selling point now required constant, costly upkeep, a burden that no longer seemed worth bearing. Moreover, the value of the land had skyrocketed. Manhattan's real estate was hotter than ever, and the economics of the day favored new, cutting-edge developments over the upkeep of historic relics. Consequently, the city investing building, with its outdated design and spiraling maintenance costs, simply couldn't compete with the new breed of skyscrapers springing up in the city. The demolition made way for the United States Steel Building, a modern colossus that better suited the times, with its sleek lines and up-to-date amenities. These days, architectural historians often mourn the loss of the city investing building, viewing it as a casualty of the unyielding drive for modernization and profit. Its demise, alongside other architectural casualties like the original Penn Station, served as a wake-up call. These losses sparked a preservation movement as the city's residents and historians alike began to realize that once a piece of history is gone, it's gone for good. Today, the spot where the city investing building once stood is home to One Liberty Plaza, a modern skyscraper that fits seamlessly into the ever-evolving skyline of New York City, a towering symbol of the city's constant reinvention. Joseph Pulitzer stood at his desk, 26 stories above the bustling streets of 1890s Manhattan, surveying his domain through the windows of a dome inspired by St. Peter's Basilica. The Hungarian immigrant who had transformed American journalism had just completed something unprecedented, a skyscraper that would house not just a newspaper, but a message written in steel and stone. Indeed, his New York world building declared to all who beheld it that the press had become America's new secular religion, its gilded dome and soaring height eclipsing even Trinity Church as Manhattan's tallest structure. And yet, within a single human lifetime, this architectural masterpiece would vanish completely, sacrificed to the gods of urban progress. In today's episode of Old Money Mansions, we share how the story of its rise and fall mirrors the arc of American journalism itself, from the heights of power and influence to an uncertain future, as we describe why New York demolished the greatest skyscraper in media. The late 19th century marked a transformative period in American journalism, as newspaper empires rose to unprecedented heights of power and influence. In New York City, this transformation was particularly dramatic, manifesting not just in rising circulation numbers and political influence, but in the very architecture of the city itself. The fierce rivalry between Joseph Pulitzer's New York World and William Randolph Hearst's Journal what would become known as the circulation wars, drove innovation in both journalism and architecture, as these media titans sought to establish their dominance through increasingly ambitious headquarters. In 1883, Joseph Pulitzer had purchased the struggling New York World for $346,000, transforming it from a failing newspaper into the most widely read and influential paper in the country. His success demonstrated the growing power of the press in American life, and by 1889, Pulitzer was ready to commission a headquarters that would reflect this new reality. He turned to architect George B. Post, already famous for his innovative work on the Equitable Life Assurance Building and the New York Stock Exchange. The site Pulitzer chose was strategic, 53 to 63 Park Row, directly facing City Hall. This location placed his newspaper at the literal and metaphorical center of New York's political life, in the heart of what was then known as Newspaper Row. The existing newspaper buildings in the area, including the New York Times Building and the Tribune Building, had already established the district as the center of American journalism, but they would soon be overshadowed by Pulitzer's ambitions. The timing of the World Building's conception coincided with a crucial moment in architectural history. The Chicago School, led by architects like William LeBaron Jenney, had recently pioneered the use of steel frame construction, enabling buildings to reach unprecedented heights. New York's architects were eager to adopt and advance these innovations, and Post saw in Pulitzer's commission an opportunity to push the boundaries of what was possible. The technical challenges were formidable. The building would need to serve multiple functions: a newspaper printing plant with massive presses in the basement, a modern office building with adequate light and ventilation for hundreds of workers, and a symbolic monument to the power of the press. The site itself presented challenges, requiring deep foundations to support both the unprecedented height of the structure and the constant vibration of the printing presses. Post's solution would combine cutting-edge engineering with classical architectural elements. The steel frame would be clad in a skin of stone and terracotta, maintaining the aesthetic expectations of the era while enabling the building to rise far higher than traditional masonry construction would allow. The design called for 26 stories, culminating in a magnificent dome inspired by the architecture of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, a deliberate reference that positioned journalism as a new kind of secular religion in American life. The building's innovative features included larger windows than had been possible with traditional construction methods, a sophisticated system of pneumatic tubes for moving copy between floors, and multiple high-speed elevators, themselves a relatively new technology. The integration of these modern systems within a classically inspired exterior embodied the spirit of the age, progressive and forward-looking, yet conscious of historical continuity. Construction began in 1889 at a cost that would eventually reach $2.5 million, an astronomical sum for the time. As the building rose above Park Row, it became clear that Pulitzer was creating something unprecedented. Not just a newspaper office, but a cathedral of journalism that would reshape both the skyline and the public's perception of the press's role in American society. When the New York World Building opened its doors in December 1890, it marked a defining moment in architectural history. The structure rose to 309 feet at its lantern top, with its spire reaching an impressive 350 feet, 110 meters, into the Manhattan sky. While it was undoubtedly the tallest building in New York City at its completion, surpassing Trinity Church's 284-foot spire, claims of it being the world's tallest building remain a matter of historical debate. The architectural achievements of George B. Post's design were remarkable for their time. The building utilized a steel skeleton construction, employing the innovative Phoenix column system that enabled both its soaring height and larger window openings than traditional masonry construction would allow. The sophisticated curtain wall combined brick, terracotta, and stone, establishing a pattern that would influence skyscraper design for years to come. The building's crowning glory was its magnificent dome, inspired by St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Measuring 52 feet in diameter and rising through 3 stories, it was topped with a gilded figure of Minerva, the Roman goddess of wisdom. This statue stood as a powerful symbol of the press's role in society, while the dome itself became an instantly recognizable landmark on the New York skyline. Joseph Pulitzer chose to place his private office suite within the dome structure, providing him with commanding views of City Hall, the Brooklyn Bridge, and the bustling streets of Lower Manhattan. This physical positioning of the publisher's office at the building's summit served as a powerful metaphor for the press's role as society's watchdog. The building's foundations extended deep below street level to bedrock, necessary to support both the unprecedented height of the structure and the weight of the newspaper's printing operations. The World Building represented a remarkable fusion of practical newspaper production facility and symbolic architectural statement. Its printing presses operated in the basement, while above, hundreds of journalists, editors, and support staff worked to produce one of the nation's most influential newspapers. The World Building stood as more than just an office structure. It was a physical manifestation of the growing power and influence of the American press. Its location facing City Hall placed it at the literal center of New York's political life, while its soaring height and dramatic architecture announced the arrival of newspapers as major institutions in American society. This innovative building demonstrated that a skyscraper could serve both as a practical commercial structure and as a powerful symbolic statement. The World Building's marriage of cutting-edge construction techniques with dramatic architectural design established new possibilities for what a corporate headquarters could be, influencing the development of commercial architecture for decades to follow. The success of Post's design lay in its ability to meet the complex demands of a modern newspaper operation while creating an architectural landmark that captured the public's imagination. The building stood as a symbol of both the technological progress and the cultural ambitions of its era, embodying the spirit of innovation and grandeur that characterized America's first great age of skyscraper construction. Throughout the 1890s and early 1900s, the New York World Building stood as the epicenter of American journalism during what many historians consider the Golden Age of newspapers. Under Pulitzer's leadership, the New York World grew to become one of the nation's most influential newspapers. The building itself, with its distinctive dome visible across Lower Manhattan, became both a symbol of the press's power and a landmark that helped define the city's identity. From its strategic position on Park Row, the World Building witnessed and reported on some of the most significant events of the era. Its proximity to City Hall gave world reporters unprecedented access to political stories, while the building's impressive height offered unique vantage points of the growing metropolis. The sidewalks outside the building became gathering places where citizens would congregate to read the latest news posted on bulletin boards. The paper's crusading journalism, practiced under Pulitzer's motto, "An institution that should always fight for progress and reform," helped establish new standards for American reporting. The world's coverage of political corruption, social injustice, and corporate malfeasance demonstrated the growing influence of investigative journalism in American society. Newspaper Row, with the World Building as its architectural centerpiece, represented the physical concentration of print journalism in the urban landscape. The building's neighbors included the New York Times Building, the Tribune Building, and other newspaper headquarters, creating what was essentially a concentrated media district. This proximity of news operations facilitated both competition and collaboration among papers. The World Building's presence helped establish Park Row as a crucial location during major news events. Its position near the Brooklyn Bridge's Manhattan terminus placed it at a key entry point to the city, making it one of the most visible buildings in Lower Manhattan. During significant news events, the area around the building would transform into an informal public square where citizens from all walks of life gathered to learn about and discuss current events. The World Building's Golden Age coincided with a period of unprecedented growth and change in American society. As the nation industrialized and urbanized, as waves of immigrants transformed the city's demographics, and as new technologies revolutionized daily life, the world building stood as a constant presence, its journalists chronicling these changes from their perch above Park Row. The building became not just a workplace, but a symbol of the press's role in making sense of this rapidly evolving world. Pulitzer maintained an office in the building's distinctive dome, continuing to oversee his newspaper empire even as his health declined. The building's architectural prominence matched the world's journalistic influence, making it a fitting headquarters for one of the nation's leading newspapers during this pivotal period in American history. The world building's fortunes began to shift dramatically in the 1920s. The death of Joseph Pulitzer in 1911 had marked the end of an era, and though the newspaper continued to operate, the media landscape was undergoing fundamental changes. The rise of radio news began competing with print media, while improvements in transportation and communication technology meant newspapers no longer needed to cluster around City Hall for rapid access to breaking news. Among the building's notable tenants during this period was Nat Strong, a significant figure in Negro League baseball, who maintained an office in the building from 1900 until his death in 1935. Strong's long-term presence in the building represented a connection to an important chapter in American sports history. The Great Depression dealt a devastating blow to the New York world. After several years of financial struggles, the paper ceased publication in 1931. The merger with the Evening Telegram to create the New York World Telegram marked the end of the world building's role as the world's headquarters. However, the building found new purpose as the headquarters of the Journal of Commerce, ensuring its continued connection to the publishing industry. The most dramatic chapter in the building's history began in 1953, when plans were announced for the expanded Brooklyn Bridge entrance ramp. The city's Robert Moses-led infrastructure expansion program identified the world building's site as crucial for improving access to the bridge. The building, which had once symbolized the height of architectural and journalistic ambition, was now seen as an obstacle to urban progress. The demolition of the world building, which took place between 1955 and 1956, was a complex operation. The very features that had made it remarkable, its height, its dome, its sturdy construction, now presented significant challenges to the wrecking crews. Before demolition began, efforts were made to preserve some of the building's most significant architectural elements. Most notably, a large stained glass window and the building's cornerstone were saved and transferred to the Columbia University School of Journalism, where they serve as reminders of this lost architectural treasure. The relatively muted public response to the demolition stands in stark contrast to the preservation battles that would erupt just a decade later. In the mid-1950s, New York City had not yet developed the strong preservation movement that would later emerge in response to losses like Penn Station. The world building's destruction proceeded without significant public opposition, reflecting the priorities of an era focused on automotive infrastructure and urban renewal. The site's transformation from a landmark of journalism to part of the bridge approach system represented a profound shift in urban priorities. Where the world building had once stood as a monument to the power of the press and the ambitions of the Gilded Age, vehicles now moved along expanded entrance ramps to the Brooklyn Bridge. This transformation reflected the ascendancy of automotive infrastructure over architectural heritage in mid-20th century urban planning. The demolition of the world building proved to be part of a larger pattern. In the following decades, many other significant structures would fall to similar infrastructure projects, leading eventually to a backlash that would help establish New York's landmark preservation laws. However, these protections came too late for Pulitzer's Tower, which had already been sacrificed to the demands of automotive circulation. The destruction of the world building exemplifies a pivotal moment in New York's urban development history. The decision to sacrifice this pioneering skyscraper for a bridge ramp reflected the mid-20th century's prioritization of automotive infrastructure over architectural preservation. Unlike later controversial demolitions, such as Penn Station or the Savoy Plaza Hotel, the World Building's demise came before the emergence of a strong preservation movement in New York City. Today, the site where the World Building once stood offers no hint of its former glory. The expanded Brooklyn Bridge entrance ramp serves its intended purpose, but the loss of this pioneering skyscraper significantly diminished the architectural character of Lower Manhattan. The demolition effectively erased a crucial piece of both architectural and journalistic history from the cityscape. The preserved artifacts at Columbia University's School of Journalism, the stained glass window and cornerstone, stand as the only physical remnants of this once magnificent structure. These surviving pieces serve as tangible links to an era when newspapers wielded enough power and wealth to construct architectural masterpieces that rivaled civic and religious monuments. The timing of the World Building's destruction proves particularly significant in the context of architectural preservation. Its demolition occurred just before the watershed moments that would transform how New York viewed its architectural heritage. The loss of Pennsylvania Station in 1963 and the resulting public outcry would lead to the creation of the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission in 1965. But these protections came a decade too late for Pulitzer's Tower. Perhaps most significantly, the demolition of the World Building marked the end of an era when newspapers were the dominant force in American media. The physical destruction of Pulitzer's Tower coincided with the broader transformation of American journalism, as television news began its ascendancy and the traditional newspaper industry entered a long period of change. The grand newspaper buildings of Park Row, which once symbolized the power of the press, gave way to a new media landscape, increasingly disconnected from physical architecture. The World Building's legacy lives on primarily in photographs and architectural drawings, which document its innovative design and cultural significance. These images remind us of a time when publishers built monuments to match their ambitions, and when the New York skyline itself told the story of American journalism's golden age. The building's fate demonstrates how quickly society can discard even its most significant landmarks when priorities shift, and how the physical monuments of one era can become the obstacles of another. Today, as New York continues to wrestle with questions of preservation versus development, the ghost of the World Building offers important lessons. Its destruction stands as a reminder of what can be lost when short-term infrastructure needs are prioritized over architectural and cultural heritage. The transformation of its site from a cathedral of journalism to a bridge ramp represents both the practical demands of urban evolution and the cultural costs of unchecked modernization.